Hello and welcome, Stand Up World, episode 63. Good to have you back. You're a new listener, watcher. Thanks for stopping in. Say hello to our wonderful producer, Patrick Arnold.
Hey, Mike.
I'm from Boston. How you doing, Patrick? So, this is good. Something you may not know. I'm down a gallbladder. Last night, I did a show with Howie Mandel. He introduced me, said our next comedian is going to be performing without a gallbladder. And yes, I had a gallbladder out. I was out for a while. And turns out that gallbladders, you don't need them. Their two organs are to what white men are to Western society nowadays. No one needs them. And the minute they become a pain in the side, you just get rid of them. Go on about your life until you hit that first big bump in the road, you shit down your leg, and then you wish you had your gallbladder again. Same thing with white men. It's all good, but sorry, Patrick, I'm rambling. My friend who did Harris Pete, who doesn't have a gallbladder, told me, I'll get ready. He says, get ready, because when you have to take a crap, there's no more waiting or holding it in. You just got to take a crap without a gallbladder. And I said, that's been me since I was in my 50s. In the old days, man, I could hold in a crap. I don't know what I'm talking about this for. I could hold in a crap for 5 days. I could take my kids to Disneyland, Legoland, Six Flags over Georgia, all these places I didn't want to use the bathroom at. SeaWorld, finally 5 days later, come home and use my own bathroom. Nowadays, I gotta go to the bathroom. I think, oh man, I gotta take a, oh man. But I don't want you to think I'm sitting here, if you're watching this, I'm not wearing one of those man diapers or whatever, but I am sitting on an open fishing bucket. But that's here nor there. Still got a great show. We're gonna get it started, right, Patrick? We actually shot this a week ago before I got sick. One of my best buddies in the world, old friend, just a great guy, needs no introduction. Howie Mandel! Howie Mandel. Howie, thank you so much for doing this podcast. You know how important you are to me and how much I love you, and we've been friends for so long, and you've just been so supportive to me, and I love you as an actor and as a host and just as everything. And I love the work you're doing with your those booths, those 3-dimensional booths you do, which are so fantastic, and just your podcast, everything, man. I really thank you for coming on the pod. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Mike. I'm going to be truly honest with you. I'm just finished with podcast. I can't do another fucking podcast.
What do you mean? What was that, Patrick?
I don't know. Is he serious?
What? You got me. I thought, oh man, he's like kicking the cat. It's like the guy that comes home and kicks his cat after a rough day at work.
That's exactly that. What an analogy. That's why you're you.
Buddy. I got to tell you, Patrick, this is Patrick, by the way, our esteemed producer. He, the other night I called Howie just to call him and say hi. I wanted to actually try a joke out on him. And he answers the phone and he goes, yeah, well, listen, though, I'm on stage. I go, no, you're not. He goes, yeah, I am. Hold on. And then he said, somehow he made the audience laugh. He goes, do you think I have a laugh track with me?
I don't know how this guy did it.
I don't know. He did one of my jokes or something. Yeah. I don't know what he did.
If you were calling me to try out a joke, that would have been a perfect opportunity. Why did you say I'll call you later? Why wouldn't you say, let me try this out?
No, you said I wanted to. You said, can I call you later? As soon as I realized you were really on stage, I wanted to say, hey, can I try out a joke?
Oh, I wish you would have. That would have been great. I would have done it in a heartbeat.
I know you are. Howie Howie will go. That's the one thing I love about Howie's comedy. We used to fly on planes together, and he would just like turn it into comedy, a stage, and or we go around college campuses and everything. He has that secret of improv, which is you don't say no. You just go with it.
Right. I
There's
found it so fascinating in the documentary you guys did, just about how free and improv you were, Howie, and it was very like pioneer-esque, where you were like, there was not many people doing what you were doing, yet you were just crushing, and it was hard to
thank
deny,
you.
like up until you couldn't. Like, so I just thought I
I didn't
found your
know it
whole
was
story
called,
fascinating.
I didn't know it was called crowd work until recently.
Right, right.
It was
So
just
true.
me. And it was
So
me,
true.
I talk about everything I was ever punished for, expelled for, got in trouble for is what I get paid for. And that was, my whole act. And when I met Mike, I don't know that people know this, but Mike has a big hand in my career. I got up on stage in Toronto, Canada on a dare, and I was just an audience member. And the truth is, I don't know anything about improv, but I also never say no. I've never said no. And I've been diagnosed with ADHD, and maybe that's part of it, not thinking about ramifications. I just go for it. But I also have this fear, as I think it was Oprah that coined FOMO, fear of missing out. I always feel like if you say no, no is NO, which is the first two letters in the word nothing. But I'm always afraid that nothing's going to happen if I say no. If I say yes, even a failure becomes something. And to be totally honest with you, when somebody said to me, you want to get up on stage and do something, I didn't ever think about being a comedian. I didn't think about being in show business. But
He was selling carpet. You were selling carpets, right?
good memory. Yes, I was selling carpet. So I thought, if there's anything funny about this, the thing that's funny about this is somebody's going to go, ladies and gentlemen, Howie Mandel. And there's no reason that anybody ever needs to say, ladies and gentlemen, Howie Mandel. Like, there's no reason for me to be presented anywhere. And in fact, I've never been presented. I've been asked to leave, but never, please welcome. So when I got on stage, which I thought was the end of the joke, and this, Mike, from being a comedian,
Yeah.
when that applause, which is for nothing, for just showing up, ends, I was looking, that bright light in my eye. I'd never had a spotlight on me. I could see the microphone. I could see the first three rows, and people are just staring at me like, do something. And the fear that I felt, the discomfort that I felt in realizing I had nothing to offer anybody in the room, became my act. And I didn't have a plan. And I realized I got to do something. And in that panic, I started going, okay, all right. And they could feel my discomfort in that, okay, all right, okay. And then they start giggling. And I didn't really understand. I was not versed in performing and whatever. They started giggling, and I'd go, what? No, tell me what. Okay. And they would laugh at that.
That was the act. That was the act. And
That was
I
my
remember
act.
you built your
wasn't.
act around that. Like, okay,
But-
what? Why are you laughing? What?
Well, but it really was what? That's my crowd work. Like, that's when you talk about improv. I wasn't improving. I was fucking scared to death. And then I put my hands in my pocket because I had nothing to do. And because I've been pretty open about it, but my mental health issues, I always had rubber gloves with me, because if I was out in public, then I was going to go to a public bathroom, and I didn't want to touch things. So I bought at drugstores. I always bought like surgical gloves, and I took it out. I don't know what made me do it, but I pulled it over my head, and I was just breathing with my nose, and the fingers were going up and down. The audience was laughing. And then I took it and I blew it up and I inflated it, and it popped off, and the audience roared. And I had enough wherewithal to go, oh, this must be what a closer is. Good night. And I ran off stage. And Mark Breslin was there, and he said, come back tomorrow. He was the owner of Yuck Yucks. And I said, what do you want me to do? And he goes, do the same thing. I go, what the fuck did I just do? And that became my act. And then Mike, who's from Detroit, and Dave Coulier would come. I saw you. I met a lot of people like Leno, and would come and play Yuck Yucks, and you came and played Yuck Yucks. And that's how I met you. And I met comics.
Yep,
and
right.
For me, this was a place I didn't play cards. I didn't dance. Disco was very big at the I didn't really drink. I didn't do sports. I couldn't get a basketball game with people. So this was a place. If I dropped in at Yuck Yucks 2-3 times a week, it was a great place to lay off steam. And there
People
was,
knew us. It was people knew us, you know. People knew
yeah,
us. We'd go to the club. You know that whole thing about you want to go, everyone knows your name. You know, that was the thing for guys like us. We'd go to the comedy clubs, and that was the one place where the staff and the other comics and eventually some of the audience knew us.
but that was kind of great. It was kind of a warm feeling, but I never even dreamed, even at that point, that this could be a career. When I went down to California, I got in touch with people that I had met at Yuck Yucks. I was just on vacation, and Mike got me on. You got me on at Westwood at the Comedy Store. Hang on, I'm going to hang up on this. He got me. He goes, I can get you a spot at Westwood. And at Westwood, I can't remember what the other name. It was Mitzi's friend ran that club and told Mitzi about me. Adele, that's who it was. Adele saw me on stage and said I was good. And they said the next night I can come and play Sunset. And then Mitzi made me a regular. And that same night, there was a guy in the audience by the name of George Foster who said, do you want to do television? And I said, yeah. It was so bullshitty Hollywood. Like some guy comes up to me. He goes, okay, come to my office tomorrow. It's the first time I was ever on a studio lot. It was KTLA on Sunset Boulevard. And it turns out Mike was doing this show. It's called Make Me Laugh. And I had to go into this meeting. And I remember I met Biff Maynard and Marty Cohen. And Marty Cohen, they were writers, and they stood in the room and they said, make us laugh. And I didn't have, it was like, okay. And all this stuff. They said, it's really funny. Are you going to be here tomorrow? And they signed me to do 5 episodes, which they'd shoot in one day. I didn't know what it was. And I got on Make Me Laugh.
They didn't want, they wanted you just to do your thing. They just said, just do your thing. But if you remember, I don't know if you remember, you ended up having like a whole table full of things that you would bring out, and you really went for it.
Yeah, but I went, I said, go get me a jar. And they went and got me a jar. And I remember like the celebrity guest was Dr. Joyce Brothers. I had to make her laugh. And I came out with it and I go, look at the whole night. I was so cold. And then I realized I looked at my door to my apartment and I realized my door is ajar. And she would, that was
my wife and my son, they have a favorite bit of yours from the Detroit Comedy Jam. We still talk about it when you looked at this lady in the audience, you're talking and you're doing your thing. You said to her, you know what I don't understand? And she goes, what? You go, Spanish.
Yes, I just don't. I don't because
and then you just walked away from her.
Now it's dad jokes and things like that, but it was just like whatever popped into my head, I would just say. And that aired, and then they brought me back down, and I did the Merv Griffin show, and then what's his name from Kiss, Gene Simmons, saw me on Merv Griffin and hired me to be the opening act for his girlfriend, who happened to be Diana Ross. I didn't even have an act, and then I was in Vegas. And then I got the young comedian special. Brenda Carlin remember she was casting. It's George Carlin's wife. She saw me at the Comedy Store and put me on the young comedian special. My young comedian special, it was me, Richard Lewis, Jerry Seinfeld, and Harry Anderson. And the Smothers Brothers presented us at the Roxy. So I just fell into this whole thing. Because of you, Mike, I fell in. I'd never pursued it. And I just kept getting calls and calls and calls. One thing leads to another. And before you know it, you're on Mike Binder's podcast. So it's kind of like
So isn't it sad this is where it all ends?
But you're with a friend. I'm with a friend.
You were the friend. You came to the Yuck Yucks with friends. So it's a perfect circle.
It is.
It's a perfect circle.
I
listen, man. I remember right from the very beginning. You didn't have a lot of material, but you loved to be around comedians. You loved to be part of it. You loved being a comedian. You loved learning. You always were open to any idea. Oh, okay, yeah, let's try it. Grab a pail. Let's do it. Let's
But
do
you
it.
know what? You
And
know what it was for me, and it still is, and politically it changed, but I think the pendulum is swinging back somewhat. It felt like, I was always misbehaving and not fitting the mold of whatever people in my generation had to fit, behavioral wise, in school, corporately, whatever. When you went to a comedy club, even as a viewer, when I was there, I was seeing people of my age and my ilk, people that I could relate to, who seemed to be breaking rules, in talking about things you didn't hear people talk about publicly, like especially in a comedy club. It wasn't like watching when you watched a comic on the Tonight Show and you saw like a nice written smooth act. What was great is when you went to the club, these were like rule breakers and edginess. And we talked about in your documentary, just being in the room when people like Richard Pryor would be trying shit out, like crazy shit. He was showing up, he was still burned on his neck from
yeah,
freebasing, and making jokes about a near death experience and making jokes. And, in that audience, you were there with me, he would range from uncontrollable laughter to jaw dropping shock. And what was great, what I loved in throughout the years, and I said this up until a couple of years ago, throughout the years, I love the idea, even though people may know me as a host of a game show or a reality show judge, or I did Deal or No Deal or Saturday morning cartoons, my heart and my soul was in that feeling of the club, of there are no edits, there are no marks to hit, there's no commercials to throw to. And my favorite moments are watching it go bad and try to dig yourself out of that bad place. And even if that bad place, and it's not, your phone rings in the middle of a performance and you have to answer the phone and a friend's on the phone, it's just, I don't know where it's going to go. I'm not going to say no to that. I'm not going to pick it up and be nervous and hang up, because I'm on stage. And that propelled me. And then a couple of years
yeah,
ago, political awareness kind of took over, even before this, whatever people call woke. It started in colleges. A lot of my friends who used to play colleges, you'd think you played at colleges because that would be the young, open-minded people where you could go so far. They were the first people to really shut down. But I think the pendulum swung really far into the woke. And I feel like with people like Shane Gillis and, Bert Kreischer and Ari Shafir and all these Austin comics and all these new guys, Mark Norman and all these people who don't give a shit about that and believe in the purity of what it is, and it is an art form, that purity, are bringing the pendulum back, and they're selling bigger numbers than anybody that is trying to conform to whatever you believe you need to conform to. And art is, even if it's comedy, is a nonconformist kind of palette that we should have. It's kind of like if you think of comedy as an art, they started telling us there's certain colors you can't use. If you're a painter, you shouldn't say, you could paint anything you want, but don't use black, don't use any yellows, and it's really not right to use blue. Art suffers, and there isn't anything that we shouldn't talk about. There isn't any there too soon. The
no,
fact
that's
is,
right. And by the way, that's why I like, because I saw your show recently, and I love how fluently and often you use the N word. I rarely see other comedians use the N word as much as you do.
well,
And
and
really,
listen,
even when you're talking,
I can't take full responsibility for that. As Michael Richards always tells me, he says, Howie, if you're going to go out there,
go out there. No, no. Listen, you reminded me of a great story that didn't make the documentary, but Richard Pryor comes back from that fire one night, and he's hanging out back in the kitchen of the comedy store, and Bruce Baum says to him, "I heard a great Richard Pryor joke. Can I tell it to you?" And Pryor goes, "Yeah, go ahead." It was his first night back after the fire, after coming out of the hospital, and he said, he takes his match. And he goes, "Do you know what this is? That's Richard Pryor running from the thing." And Pryor bent over, just laughing his ass off, and he did it that night on stage, and it made the movie.
So
And
you
that's
know,
how he got that joke.
I tell the story when people are asking me about those nights, how it's not too soon. I said Richard Pryor came up with that joke. I had no idea that it was that Bruce Baum had told him that.
Bruce Baum told him at the Comedy Store in the kitchen, and everyone said, "Don't tell, don't." And he told it to him, and he laughed his ass off and just went right up and did it.
See, my contention, and this is going to sound very, I think most people do not have a sense of humor. I don't think that that is a normal thing. It's kind of like most people don't have a sense of style. I think that's why humanity will go look at magazines and figure out what they're wearing. And most people aren't trendsetters. They'll dress trendy because they see that that's the trend. By the same token, they don't have the taste to create something themselves. By the same token, I don't think most people have a sense of humor. And
That's a good point.
it is a sense, and it is to find the humor, and humor really does. All humor comes out of darkness. All humor, it's all that's why the tragedy and comedy masks are so close together. You know, if you're a little kid and you go to the circus, you're laughing at a clown falling down. You're laughing at the misfortune of somebody you don't know. That's what you're laughing at. If something bad doesn't happen, it's not funny. If something embarrassing doesn't happen, it's not funny. If something awkward doesn't happen, it's not funny. So it's always
Absolutely.
so the point is that, you know, we tell people they think they have a good sense of humor because we even approach people in regular life and go, "You want to hear a joke? You want to hear something funny?" You have to tell them. You got to headline it. "This is a joke. What I'm telling you is not a true story. This is a joke. And when I stop talking, you better say ha ha because this is really funny." You know, and we shouldn't have to. I think in the comedy community, you don't even have to do that. Mostly in the comedy community, they recognize good jokes without even really laughing at it. But you should be able, for me personally, as someone who suffers from mental health issues and has a tough time each and every day mentally, laughter is my bridge to existing. You know,
Me
and
too.
there is a thin line between making myself laugh or trying to make somebody else laugh and being just crushed with darkness and crying, you know, and that's
I agree. I agree. And I love to laugh. I love to laugh. And I love to make people laugh. And I also love to crush people and make them cry. So it's no, I'm kidding. But you know, it's so funny because I love what you said. You have to have very few people have a sense of humor, but even more, so many people are afraid of humor. I, I've learned. I've tried jokes on my wife or people or friends, and they'll go, "Oh, you can't say that." I go, "Who? What? Why? Why?" And then you go up to an
because,
audience, and the audience laughs, and they go, "Well, what were you afraid of?" It's the audience loves
well,
it.
I'll tell you what you're
And
afraid of. You're afraid of. Listen, I was really good friends, and God rest his soul, Gilbert Gottfried, who I loved, and I loved Gilbert Gottfried because his brand, for all intents and purposes, was too soon, you know, and
yeah, right.
inappropriateness. You know, that was his brand. My favorite times with Gilbert Gottfried was we used to hang out whenever I was in New York. I would call Gilbert, and we'd go to the Carnegie Deli. And if you've never been to the Carnegie Deli, is gone now, but it was I don't know what you call that kind of seating, but everybody can sit. You don't get a table for two.
Yeah,
You
yeah,
sit at
yeah.
a
Family,
table,
yes, family style.
except you don't know that family. It's not your family. It's everybody's
Yeah, right,
family.
right.
There'd be 20 people at the table, and we would sit down at the table, and there'd be a tourist right next to them, and they'd have a picture of a giant pastrami sandwich, and I'd go, Gilbert, how are you? And he would, I don't do impressions, but he would go, "I'll tell you, my ass is filled with pus. I don't know if it's a pus or if it's a lesion, but I was shitting, and the whole bowl was filled with pus." And you know, the people are eating. You'd see them like put down their sandwich, and but you also know that he did the close to Hugh Hefner right after 9/11, and he said he couldn't get a direct flight. They were stopping at the towers. He was trying to get out of there, and that was like 36 hours after 9/11, which is incredibly
Uh,
famous. But here's a guy who and he did this his whole career. And then for whatever reason, he tweeted something about that tsunami in Taiwan and lost the whole Affleck campaign, which was probably 65% of his income. And that was like when you realize that was the first, at least
Yeah.
close to me, where I went,
Yeah.
really? Really? I mean, you don't have to laugh at the joke. You don't have to like the joke. You don't even have to get the joke, but you're going to take away, you're going to remove his livelihood. This is a man with a wife and 2 kids. You're going to just negate him for this joke that you don't like. That isn't even pointed at one particular person. Like who is damaged by this? And who is ever really damaged by comedy? Ever.
No. And what they're always afraid of, they're afraid maybe 1 or 2 people, you know?
But they're not damaged. They're complaining. They're
complaining. That's what I mean. They're not. Robert Klein used to have this great bit. They said, they wouldn't let me say Jew boy on the Tonight Show because they were afraid they'd get too many letters. Why don't you say Jew bastard? It's like that, but it's true. It was just like so. They were just afraid of letters and phantom complaints. I will tell you, I'm good friends with Bobby Kennedy, and we're doing this big show for him tomorrow night. This will be and after. But I made this really funny video. It was really funny, and everyone saw it, loved it, and Bobby loved it, and it was pretty dark. And it was I did some crazy shit in it about him, and his people on his team, his handlers, just talked him. Mike can't show that video. There'll be press there, and Bobby.
Here's the difference. One of the guys that I kind of love the way he does things. Do you know who Rick? The name just went. Who's the guy that is a producer? He produced one of Dice's albums, but he's known for doing Def Jam and.
Rick
Rubin.
Yeah.
Rubin, I love that guy. And I love, he's like more of a guru or a philosopher because he talks about the art form. And the art form, he said, and this works for comedy too. He said, if you are doing your art, and whether that's your music or your comedy, or you're doing a video for somebody that you think is really funny, if you're doing it to raise money, this is going to be at a campaign event, or you're doing comedy because you want to sell tickets and you think that everybody's going to laugh. He says that's not art, that's commerce. Art is if you feel creative, satisfy yourself, do it for you. And I have found that when I have done the best in comedy, I've been criticized. I've never really been a darling of the comedy community because of what I do. But it makes me laugh. It makes me happy. And at this point in my life, I just want to laugh. And the truth of the matter is some of my best nights, even, we talk about this all the time. I'm dropping in on clubs now. And I'm enjoying it more than when in the 80s when I got to play arenas and things like that. If there's a room with 11 people, sometimes I'll just drop in and there's 11 people and it's 11:30 at night. And I could just it's so funny, so awkward, so uncomfortable, so great, so unique. It is, for me, it's like the classic music of comedy. For me. It probably, what I do in that room would never be sold as a Netflix special. It would never be something that I would put on YouTube. It's just something that I love. And I think when we do comedy that really, truly makes us laugh and it's authentic and you think it's great, even if nobody else thinks it's great, because, humor is luck. We've talked about this before. The luck of the draw is if you go to any amateur night at a comedy club, you'll look and you'll see people just go into the toilet and you go, that's really uncomfortable. But then you got to realize that very few people that you see on that stage, no matter how bad they are, no matter how awkward, are there of their own volition. They're there because one person said, you're really funny. You should get up on stage. Or one time somebody laughed at something they said. The luck of the draw is, and there's a time and a place for everything, is when I got up and I started being silly and uncomfortable and whatever I was, as luck would have it, a room of 150 people that I didn't know were enjoying that moment. I feel that's pretty lucky that whatever my sensibility was kind of translated to a large group besides my mom and dad and people that were sitting at the table. By the same token, and I've told this so many times, you know, in 24 hours in the 80s, I remember like one of my first big wins was selling out 2 Radio City Music Hall shows in like 24 hours, like at the same night. I was going to do an 8 and a 10 o'clock show. And at 9:30 at night, my wife and I were up in the dressing room and we're looking, I've told this story so many times, but I'm looking down on 7th Avenue and 6,500 people are teaming out onto the street in New York. And 6,000 people are coming in for the next show. I went a little long on the first show. And they have stanchions out there and there's cops out there and there's a traffic jam. And in the middle of the biggest city in the world, you know, 14,000 people are blocking all this traffic. And my wife says, what are you thinking? And I said, I'm going to be totally honest with you. This is one of the biggest cities I've ever been to. There's 10 million people here. This means that 986,000 people don't give a fuck I'm here. So the truth of the matter is there's always more people that don't like it, don't get it, are not touched by it. You really gotta, in life, and this is not just comedy, life is fast, life is short, serve yourself and serve the people you love. And in everything that you do, in your comedy, in your art, you know, find your art, and your art doesn't have to be stand-up, and your art doesn't have to be painting, and your art doesn't have to be music. Whatever you do, your art is your collection. Your art is your mingling with people. This is the things that I like to do. Your art, I think that life is art. Life is creative. Every waking moment is a creation, is a story. You're creating a story. Sometimes not a story you're telling anybody but yourself, but you're always creating a story.
Does it bother you that my art is a little room in my basement with, I would say, 10,000 pictures of you on every area of the wall? Does that, and is that weird?
Weird. It's an uncomfortable, but making me uncomfortable is an art form.
Yeah.
And you are.
Hey, before I let you go, I want to talk to you about 2 things. I want to change the subject twice because we were talking about your early days, and one of the things that people forget, and I remember it so well because Bruce Paltrow was my good friend, but how great you were on St. Elsewhere, and what a good actor you are.
Thank you. I didn't know that, and I didn't know how good that show was. And we've talked about this before. You know, I wasn't originally cast in that show. So that show was going. I had just blown up a little bit from that Young Comedian special, which had changed my life. And I was selling tickets, and I was a stand-up. And the natural progression for every stand-up of that time, that was 1982, was to get a sitcom. You know, everybody who had done anything well in comedy was, you know, from Robin to Billy Crystal was on Soap, and, you know, every comic we knew that had any success was at least doing a pilot, was doing something. So I went over to MTM on a general meeting, which was the Mary Tyler Moore company. And they were known predominantly at that time as the masters of sitcoms. You know, they had on the Newhart Show and the Odd Couple, and obviously the Mary Tyler Moore Show and everything that spun from that. They were at the Radford Studios. And I went and met a young lady named Molly Lapata, who was the casting person from MTM. And just done a general meeting to see whether they could develop and put me with a writer to maybe get me a sitcom. And she said, do you act? And I said, well, I don't know. I haven't, but maybe it's something I could do. And she goes, read this. And she gave me a little sides to read. And it was all this medical terminology. It was really weird. And I didn't know what there was no point of reference of what I was reading. And she said, that's very good. Come down the hall. And I went down the hall. And I know now that in the room was Bruce Paltrow and Mark Tinker and Falsey and Brand and Tom Fontana. And she said, read that again. And I started reading it again. And halfway through, they went, thank you. So I figured it didn't work. And I went home, and my wife said, how did it go? And I said, I think it went shitty, but I'm not upset because I think I just read the worst sitcom I've ever read. But I got a call within a half an hour from my agent who said, go down to NBC, and Brandon Tartikoff wants to meet you. And Brandon Tartikoff, for those that don't know, was the president of NBC, and he's like probably the last great epic executive that anything that you remember. There wouldn't be a Seinfeld without him. There wouldn't be a Cheers without him. There wouldn't be a not Taxi. He's NBC, but a lot of great shows. And I went and met him, and Bruce was in the room again, and Mark Tinker. And I read, this is on a Friday, I read that same side again. They said, wait outside. I stood outside the door, and they said, we'll see you Monday. And I thought, oh, I'm coming back to read another scene. As it turns out, my agent told me they had been shooting. They had gotten an order on St. Elsewhere for 13 episodes. They had been shooting for almost a week, and they weren't happy with the dailies. And they replaced 2 or 3 characters in this ensemble piece. And I replaced somebody, and I started on Monday. And I walked in. I don't know if you know this. Do you know this? I replaced David Paymer, who ended up, he's a great actor, ended up getting nominated for an Academy Award for Mr. Saturday Night. He played Billy Crystal's brother on Mr. Saturday Night. He did really well.
I didn't know that till you replaced. But
yeah.
I remember, and you were so good in that. You were so good in that.
And I felt like I walked onto that set and I saw, Billy Daniels. One of my favorite movies up until that time was The Graduate, and Billy was in that. I mean, people probably know him from Boy Meets World now, but Bill Daniels was there, and Norman Lloyd. I was a big fan of Alfred Hitchcock. He was the star of Spellbound. Denzel was there too, but the only thing I had seen him in was Carbon Copy. Do you remember he did one shitty comedy where he played George Segal's son?
Yeah.
Talks about that too much anymore, but all these other people I had seen from TV, and I said to Bruce, I went up to Bruce and I went, I don't know, like, thank you for this opportunity, but I don't know that this is like, do you know that I haven't, can you recommend a school or an acting class? And he goes, young man, this is the best college you can attend. Just watch, just listen, and do as you're told. And it was the best school of acting I had ever been part of.
Well, he directed my television show, my Mind of the Married Man, and we were good friends. He loved you. He thought you were great.
I loved him. He gave me a great opportunity.
You're the best. I'll tell you what, Howie, I love you. You're a special guy. You really are. You're really a special guy, and I just love talking about your career. Because what people don't know, you've never stopped, and we're lucky guys. And I feel really lucky to know you.
Well, any time in life, and that's art again. If you can get up each and every day or any day and be excited about something you're going to do, you might try to do, then you're really lucky. A lot of people wake up and they go, oh shit, another day. And maybe I'll get to the weekend where I won't do this shit that I'm doing every day. But I think you and me are lucky that we found something in life that is kind of fun and exciting.
You the man. Thanks a lot, buddy.
Thank
you. Terry.
I will. Bye.
I love that guy. He's just the best. He's so funny. And people don't know, too, I will tell you how funny he is live. We did this show last night at the Laugh Factory, and he just killed. Every time he goes on stage, he's so off the cuff and so quick, and he's a great comic. A lot of people nowadays just know him from AGT and Deal or No Deal, I guess, I don't know, but he's just such a great comic. So if you ever get a chance to see Howie live, see him live. And that's it. By the way, March 30th, coming up. If you're in LA, I'm at the Ice House with Erica Rhodes and Vinny Fastline and Dwight Pride and Dave Murphy and who else? I know I'm forgetting someone else, but just a bunch of pals. So it's going to be a great show. Saturday night, March 30th, 8 p.m. Come down and see us. And that's it. Thank you so much for tuning in and listening to me babble up front. I don't know what that was about. But next week we have a great episode, too. So thank you so much for your support. It means a lot. Thanks a lot.